for being here. And as you all know, my name is Lloyd de Jongh. And before we begin, I we had a really interesting discussion for 45 minutes prior to this. By the way, this is my YouTube channel. Okay, it's just under my name, Lloyd de Jongh. You can see it here. So you'll be able to learn more about the things that I post on, the things that I discuss. I've already done 2 episodes of the Islamic lobby on my channel. Recently, I'm also talking about the Muslim Talmud, Sharia law. That's my expertise, Islamic law. And I also talk about Islam at some depth from a historical as well as legal perspective. Okay, and of course, we've had various chats on the Islamic ties to Nazism, the very close ties to Nazism, as well as Islamic Freemasonry, the Islamic ties to the KKK, the Shriners, the Templars, the Freemasons, and the Nazis. Okay, so that out the way, let's jump in today. We are talking about the Islamic political lobby, right? Not just the Arab lobby, but the Arabs do control it. They're the ones with the powerhouse. But we need to talk about the Islamic lobby, which is invisible, which is very powerful and extremely wealthy. Right. So now the Islamic lobby undermines U.S. interests globally, right? It influences U.S. domestic as well as foreign policy. It definitely wants the destruction of Israel. It spends billions of dollars on university influence. It spends billions on influencing universities, right? To buy the hearts and minds of students that are coming through universities. We'll get to that later on in the presentation. This should be 2 to 3 parts. We'll probably do 3 parts ultimately. It promotes the demonization of Jews, and it undermines the constitution to promote Sharia, Islamic law, the Islamic political and socio-political system and legal system, as well as Islam as the theology. Now, in Western culture, we have a saying. We say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But in Islam, they have a different saying. As I said, here our enemies say something different. In their culture, they say, do not let your enemy know he's your enemy. Very different point of view. Very few people know about this saying. But do not let your enemy know he's your enemy. Far more insidious than the above, because this is a well-known dictum. This is not. Right, bear that in mind. So, why is there no discussion of the powerful, wealthy, competing interests of the Islamic lobby? Well, now one could go into Article 22 of the Hamas Charter. When you have a chance, look up Article 22 of the Hamas Charter and have a read. It is a conspiracy theorist's wet dream. The only 2 things it doesn't have going for it in this anti-Jewish screed that is Article 22 of this Hamas Charter is that it doesn't say that the frogs are being turned gay, and it doesn't say that transdimensional aliens are taking over the planet. Those are the only 2 things that are missing. Otherwise, every conspiracy theory known to man has been thrown in there. But besides that, okay, John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt wrote this book. It's called Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. How a powerful American interest group has created havoc in the Middle East, damaged Israel itself, and now threatens an even more perilous future. They've given themselves like 1,000,000 stars. This book is worth 0 stars. They should put a little poop sign on it, right? But these guys mainstreamed the narrative. They took the Hamas propaganda. They took the communist propaganda that Hamas got their story from. They took the Nazi propaganda, and they mainstreamed it. And they updated it for the modern world. So now they claim that there's an all-powerful Israeli lobby that controls the U.S. Middle East policy and conspiratorially the U.S. itself. Their book ignored completely the existence of rival Arab Islamic interests. And coincidentally, so does the truth community, the quote-unquote truth community. Is that a coincidence? Now, they portrayed Arabs as impotent, unable to affect their own fate, or 3, influence U.S. actions. They basically created the poor Arabs have no power talking point. They mainstreamed and mainlined this. The poor Arabs have no power. They've got no agency. These are goat herders living in caves. This was their take. Now with the Hamas Charter, okay, which promotes anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, the Jews control the government talking point, which serves and benefits the Arab lobby. So this goes hand in hand. So now you've got a Western point of view, right, as well as the standard Arab Islamic talking point. Now, Islamic money promotes this narrative cloaked as pro-Palestinian. So how did the online truth community all suddenly become apologists for Islam? We're going to be seeing all of this. We're going to be going through this, especially this point here as we go through. Let's look at a typical example. I've just grabbed some quotes from social media. Right? Israel's population of just 8 million people comprises but 0.001% of the global population and is the cause of 99% of the conflicts that have occurred since 9/11. Okay, we're going to have a look at that. We're going to have to fact check that one. The Israeli government, through AIPAC and other Israeli lobbies, have a stranglehold on, all branches and levels of American government. Now, by stranglehold, what they mean is has popular support among Americans. For instance, your mother has a stranglehold on your affections. Your father has a stranglehold on your affections. Your wife has a stranglehold on your affection. You see, that's how they mean stranglehold, right? If that's exactly how they've misrepresented stranglehold. They claim that the Israeli government, 96% of the 6 major Western news outlets are controlled by these guys. They claim that through collusion between government and the media, collectively, Israel has grossly influenced the hearts and brainwashed the minds of the Western world by spewing out pro-Israel propaganda on almost a daily basis. Fine? And with $22 trillion in debt and $6 trillion spent on war since 9/11, do you feel you are getting max whack for your tax buck? So, and this guy says, I don't. So we need to have a look at all of these things. We're going to get to all of these things as we go along. So let's start with the problems with Islam. Let's look at some facts, some verifiable statistical facts. Since 9/11, there have been, now this is up to a few weeks ago, by now it's already over 42,000, 44,000. Since 9/11, there have been 41,000 recorded Islamic Jihad terror attacks. In 2021, in 53 countries, there were 2,258 attacks that murdered over 11,000 people, injuring nearly 10,000. In 2020, 54 countries had over 2,000 attacks, murdering 10,000 people, injuring 7,500. 2019, 45 countries had 1,200 Islamic terrorist attacks, murdering 6,800 people and injuring up to 7,579 up to the 30th of August 2019. 2018 saw 1,984 attacks in 55 countries, nearly 12,000 murdered, nearly 12,000 injured. 2017, over 2,000 attacks in 61 countries, over 16,000 murdered, over 14,000 injured. 2016, 2,500 attacks in 59 countries, 21,400 murdered, 27,000 injuries. 2015, 2,890 attacks in 53 countries by Muslims, with 27,641 murdered and over 26,000 injured. That is just going up to 2015. Let's have a look. This is 105,475 terrorist murders by Muslims in 15,050 Islamic Jihad attacks since 2015 alone. Your thoughts, Harry?
First things that comes to mind is religion of peace. That's
religion of very hot, warm, yellow peace, definitely.
Yeah, but I'm sure you didn't mention all the in-group killings, like Shia against Sunni, and civil wars and ISIS and all the rest of it.
Yeah, well, but yeah, I mean, this is bad enough. Understand, these are Islamic terror groups. These are known Islamic terror attacks. Okay, so this is the religion of peace. So this is one of the issues that people have with Islam, is this. Okay, let's continue. So the Arab lobby has operated unseen. It has no visible public HQ like AIPAC, and AIPAC is completely misrepresented as well. We'll get into that. It operates by stealth. It is barely known to the public and is thus not discussed. They have a policy of denying everything. James Zogby, who is actually a Arab Christian, wrote in 1982, there is no Arab lobby. Again, on the issue of denying everything, this is DePaul University political science professor Khalil Marar. He contacted Arab American organizations for interviews for research on the Arab lobby. He was told there is no Arab lobby in Washington, D.C. So basically, it's like contacting the CIA for comment on on things that the CIA are doing, and the CIA will tell you they investigated themselves and found that they are squeaky clean, right? Yet, interestingly, the Arab lobby is older than the Israeli lobby. See, the Arab National League of America was founded in the 1930s, before Israel existed. This is a lobbying group to promote Saudi interests and Arab interests. Interestingly, in 1951, King Saud of Saudi Arabia asked U.S. officials to finance a pro-Arab lobby. He asked U.S. officials to finance their lobby to counter the pro-Israel lobby, and the CIA obliged him. The CIA funded this man to start a pro-Arab lobby to counter the pro-Israel lobby. Let's continue. This is Mr. James Zogby. Let's have a closer look at him. He is founder, president of the Arab American Institute and the author of the book Arab Voices. His mission of the Arab American Institute was created to nurture and encourage the direct participation of Arab Americans in political and civic life in the United States. It represents the political policy, and community interests, political interests of Arab Americans. It promotes Arab American participation in the U.S. electoral system, which I believe is a political action, I could be wrong, as voters and as candidates. Nothing to do with politics at all, clearly. Liaison between the Arab American community and major national political parties, so he's a facilitator. The related AAI Foundation, it combats anti-Arab and anti-Muslim bigotry. In other words, these guys are Islamophobia merchants. He's the senior advisor to the polling firm Zogby International. He writes a weekly column that appears in 20 Arab newspapers. He's the host of a weekly call-in discussion program called Viewpoint on Abu Dhabi television in the UAE. And he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So, Harry, does this make him a trustworthy, warm, sweet, fuzzy person?
CFR? Yeah. We love the CFR in this group.
They're the good guys, right? They're the good guys.
Yeah.
So he's a member of the CFR. He also is a member of the Democratic National Committee. He's also the co-chair of the DNC's Resolutions Committee. He's co-founder and chairman of the Palestine Human Rights Campaign in the late 1970s. He's also the co-founder and executive director of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, More Islamophobia Merchantry. He's president of the AAI, and he runs an Arab lobbying institute, yet he claims there is no Arab lobby. This is a magazine called DC Insider, not DC Outsider, and this is him featured on the front cover, okay? So clearly this man has influence, he has connections to the DNC, right? He is a member of the CFR, he's co-chair of the DNC, which means he is close to people who've been presidential candidates recently as well. So let's have a look at, this one's going to be interesting. So let me go here for a moment. Okay, so I want to show you a couple of newspaper articles. For instance, Palestine, that little football that people love to kick around. This is a worthy watch. Believe me, it's about 10 minutes long. It's well worth watching. The imam at this New Jersey Islamic Center workshop says, the Palestinian cause is Islamic, but it must be marketed as humanitarian to get everybody's support. And he praises the BDS movement and says Israel is likely to cease existing within 50 years. Now notice he says the Palestinian cause is Islamic, that Palestinians are acting according to the dictates of their theocracy. Remember, they're a theocracy like Iran is, like the Taliban, like ISIS. They are no different, right? Palestine is an Islamic theocracy, and the whole aim of Islam to bring the end times, to bring Muhammad back and to bring Jesus back as a servant of Muhammad is to murder the Jews. And then Muhammad will come back, and then Jesus will come back, pray behind Muhammad as a Muslim. Jesus will be a good Muslim. He will destroy all the churches. He will kill all the Christians who refuse to convert to Islam. He will kill all the pigs, and there will be no more Christians left. Okay? But they must market the Palestinian cause as humanitarian. Yes?
Was it Muhammad or the Mahdi?
The Mahdi will come first, and then eventually Muhammad will come back, because Muhammad is the Shiloh from Genesis 10. He inherits the prophecy of Genesis 10. He inherits the permission to judge the dead, the living and the dead.
But he's not going to do all the killing. Jesus is.
he's going to bring Jesus to do the killing. Yeah, but, well, the Mahdi is going to go through whatever he goes through, and then eventually Muhammad comes, and then because they have to kill the Jews first, right? And then whoever survives, Jesus will come back and kill them, but Muhammad will make the judgment, and then Jesus will do his bidding. So yeah, Jesus works for Muhammad basically.
Thank you.
So understand, this is an Islamic, theological, theocratic cause, but it must be marketed. So that is just marketing. Let's see what else they have to tell us. So 25 influential American Muslims. Okay. So these are very interesting people. Okay. But we want to talk about this guy. Okay. This, of course, is the first Muslim in Congress. We know who she is. Okay. She's not grateful. She's an ingrate. We know who this woman is. Her surname means cockroach. And of course, this man is a Muslim and he oversees U.S. intelligence. Very interesting, but they have no political clout. This is Larry Ellison, right? And of course, he's known to be a wife beater, which is exactly in keeping with Islamic Sharia law. Okay, so there are various influential people here. Of course, this guy ate brains on television for CNN and went insane. Okay, till he got himself cancelled. So just so by the way, but understand there are a lot more people in the U.S. government that we are not aware of or weren't featured here. Okay, but you have a Muslim overseeing U.S. intelligence, right? There's an article in the U.S. city that is run by Muslim Americans, a city run by Muslim Americans, but they have no influence and they have no intentions, of course, right? So yeah. Now you've got in New York City, North Korean and Palestinian protesters scream death to America and death to Israel. All those people that want to support these wonderful Palestinians that want to kill them. Okay, screaming death to America. Right, let's see. 10 years of lobbying. The Qatari lobby's operations before and after the blockade. And they speak here of the Qatari lobby. Doha has realized that in order for it to become an influential actor in the region, it needs to secure itself in the world's capital, Washington. We're going to go into some depth on Doha, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. By hosting Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, Doha was able to win the most important ally in the world map. I've been to Al Udeid many times. I've worked there. Now they speak here of the Emirati lobby, the biggest spender and the largest Arab spender. Okay, the biggest. Doesn't say the smallest. Doesn't say the second biggest after Israel. It says the biggest spender and the largest Arab spender. Very, very interesting that they didn't put Israel in that list. Right, the Emirati lobby, the biggest spender and the largest Arab one. The history of the Emirati lobby, blah, 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 blah. We'll skip that. We'll get to those. Okay. Qatar adds U.S. lobbying muscle after Saudi rift. Okay, so countries will typically ramp up their spend when they find that they have lost favor. So Qatar tripled its lobbying spend after Trump came to power because Trump wasn't giving them the time of day. Qatar has been cooperating with Iran because they are trying to get influence over the Sunni Islamic world and to basically the power struggle with Saudi Arabia. And they have been funding terror. They've been funding terrorist groups. We'll get into them again. Now, notice on Qatar, just some brief as an introduction. The new documentary highlights Qatar's role in sponsoring global Muslim Brotherhood educational institutions in Europe. This is no different to the Confucius Institutes from China that are actually indoctrination institutes and are used for industrial espionage. Okay, so the Qatar's growing lobbying efforts, right? U.S. media has reported on a continuing increase in Qatari lobbying efforts, according to a Bloomberg report. It's ramping up, so they do lobby. And Los Angeles businessman imprisoned for influence scheme claims decades-long CIA relationship. Okay, that is fascinating. A massive political influence scheme with a decade-long CIA relationship. Okay, and we discussed this earlier, so now I will close this and move on. So now the role of Arab money. So that was just to give an idea that these things are going on. We're going to dive into all of that. Now, as I said, the Arab lobby is older than the Israeli lobby. It started with the Arab National League in the 30s, right? The Arab lobby is a group of 21 Islamic states plus Palestine. It is Saudi-led and dominated. It's represented in the U.S. by oil interests, defense contractors, and corporations with commercial interests in Saudi Arabia and 21 other markets. Now, the Pentagon is heavily involved here because they need weapon sales to protect U.S. interests against Iran and the former Soviet threat and others. Also, the Pentagon needs to increase the number of sales to lower unit costs, that's unit manufacturing and production costs, as well as maintenance costs, because then, of course, they have contracts to support the lifetime of these products, right? And obviously develop new products. So let's have a look at the Palestinians quickly, the Palestinian question. Are these people lobbying on behalf of the Palestinians or against Israel? Now remember, we saw earlier that they're lobbying basically against Israel. They don't really care very much because the Palestinians are doing exactly what Islam wants. This is the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem doing the Nazi salute with his SS troops that he raised for Hitler. Total of 600,000 troops, and as well as 70,000 troops in Europe that he raised. He volunteered for the Nazi army and became a general in the SS. This is him with Hitler. This is him again with Hitler. Of course, these are Palestinians rioting, having the Nazi symbol. Again, the Nazi symbol. This is Himmler, head of the SS, with our little mufti here, our Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. These are, of course, the Hamas types with their Nazi salute. Himmler again. And, of course, this one is interesting. This is the Palestinian Nazi Youth. Okay, so the Palestinians had a Nazi youth organization. They were very, very proud. We've shown this before in a previous show, but this is the Palestine flag of the Nazi youth. Okay, let's have a look at some 1930s newspaper articles. Arab youths found Nazi club in Haifa. Seem very, very Nazi friendly. Okay, the organization has strong backers. Its deficits are promptly met and seems to blah, blah. Interesting, getting money from Germany. Let's continue. Nazis affiliate with Arabs to boycott Palestinian goods. And of course, they start threatening their own people who decide to start dealing with Israel at the time, with the Palestinian Mandate territory at the time, because they threatened the boycott of Arab merchants who bought Zionist goods from Palestine. Okay? And head of the Hitler Youth Organization of Germany, they were very closely tied to the Hitler Youth. So, suspect Nazis in Palestine uprisings, okay? Suspicions of Nazi complicity in the Arab revolt increased when German citizens, who spoke Arab fluently, were arrested in Jaffa. Nazis in, 1930s in. Right, Nazi handbills openly spread in Jerusalem. Okay, so these Arabs are busy promoting Nazism directly. Swastika on Arab oranges displeases Berlin Aryans. Okay, that's fascinating. So the oranges were wrapped in paper bearing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad surrounded by swastikas. They were found to have been used by an Arab exporting firm that had no problem associating Muhammad with the swastika. I guess maybe Islam is a little Nazi-friendly. So, understand, this is the Palestinians historically, and today these are the Palestinians. That's who they were, that's who they are. Right, now, does Israel require military aid? I'll pause after this. Israel has peace treaties with only 2 of its neighbors. Technically, Israel is at war with the rest of the Arab Islamic world. Iran is openly hostile. If any of you have read the opening preamble to the Iranian constitution, just read the opening preamble. It quotes the Quran 68:4 if I recall, and it states that they must make ready all steeds of warfare, and that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps must not only defend the borders of Iran, it must also export the Iranian Islamic Revolution to the entire world. It must subjugate the entire world under the Iranian theocratic regime. So given the risks and threats, Israel must continue to maintain a strong defense. Israel is outmanned and outgunned by its enemies and relies on a qualitative advantage. There are approximately 177,000 active Israeli troops versus a combined 2.4 million Islamic troops. So they're outnumbered by something like 12 to 1. Okay? Now, new weapon systems are expensive. Israel cannot afford them on its own because, oddly enough, people don't realize Israel is not floating on oil like certain countries nearby. Aid from the United States is vital to Israel's security. Israel's enemies have numerous suppliers. They are supplied by the French, the Swedes, you name it, the Brits, all over the place. Okay, but Israel relies almost entirely on the U.S. Hence, there's a genocidal agenda to destroy the U.S.-Israel relationship. I'll pause here, Harry.
Yeah, you forgot to mention Russia as a serious supplier for the Arabs.
For the Arabs, yeah, no, the Russians have been neck deep in, yeah. No, that's certainly, we covered that before with the Russians, with the whole propaganda campaign training. The whole Arab narrative started in the 60s after the Six-Day War when they lost so badly. That's when the Russians ramped up the narrative. Yeah.
Okay. I will see if we have any questions. Guys, do you have any questions? If you do, please raise your hand. No, it's quiet.
Okay.
Continue.
So, let's look at the top 10 U.S. weapons clients. Number one is Saudi, not Israel, sadly. Let's have a look at CBS News telling us Saudi Arabia is America's number one weapons customer. Let's have a look at Statista data. The USA's biggest arms export partners. This is from 2009 to 2018. Saudi Arabia, number one at $13.5 billion of weapons bought. Australia, two at nearly $8 billion. I'm not sure who the Australians are fighting. I know that they are fighting their own population, their own people. It's not just a nation of prisoners, it's a nation of jailers too. And that has certainly been shown to us lately. Then you've got the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, $7 billion. South Korea, $6.3 billion. Sure, they've got North Korea to deal with. Then you have Iraq, over $4 billion. Singapore, nearly $4 billion. Turkey, nearly $4 billion. Japan, $3.5 billion plus. Taiwan, $3.5 billion plus. And the UK at just over $3 billion. Israel, sadly, didn't make the cut between 2009 and 2018 as the number one. They didn't even make the top 10. Let's have a look now at 2015 to 2019, once he's totaled these up. Saudi Arabia still leads with over $13 billion. Australia, $4.8 billion. The UAE, $3.4 billion. South Korea, then Japan, then Qatar. Now Israel makes an appearance with $2.24 billion. But if you start adding up Iraq, you start taking Qatar, you start taking the UAE, and you start taking Saudi Arabia, that is more than $20 billion worth of weapons. Israel, $2.2 billion. So that again, their spend outnumbers Israel by 10 to 1. Italy is at the bottom of the list just after the United Kingdom at $1.7 billion and Italy at $1.4 billion. So yeah, sadly, Israel is actually not the crazy weapons buyer, and that seems to be, well, the common narrative has told us. So the Israeli lobby reflects the will of Americans. In 1974, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General George Brown, attacked the Jewish lobby and Jewish ownership of banks and newspapers. Senator Thomas McIntyre, Democrat of New Hampshire, he was a member of the Armed Services Committee. He acknowledged the influence of the Israeli lobby, which he said reflects the will of a strong majority of all Americans, because Americans like Israel. But what about the oil lobby, he asked. He said the influence of big oil is more insidious and far more pervasive than the influence of the Jewish lobby, for oil and influence seep across ideological as well as party lines without public approval or support. Interesting. How much oil does Israel export to the rest of the world, Harry?
I think nothing.
Zero. Oh my gosh, you don't have, oh good grief. Okay, big oil must be someone else then. That could be, Saudi, Qatar,
But we have
Bahrain,
natural gas now.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, that every little bit helps, right? So understand that back then, that's a recent development. Back then, zero. And of course, big oil was more insidious, more pervasive than the influence of the Jewish lobby. Okay, so he said the Jewish lobby is not in the same league with the general's own lobby, the Pentagon and the defense establishment. Now, briefly, the Arab lobby versus AIPAC. AIPAC is domestic money. It is U.S. money raised by American Jews and American Christians. It includes Christian refugees from Lebanon who understand the Islamic threat and the agenda, who support Israel. Reasons include religious and biblical heritage, family heritage, direct knowledge of the threat to Israel by the Arab countries. So understand, AIPAC is domestic money. It is raised and given voluntarily by people living in the U.S., whereas it is not money that is sent from a foreign government for the purpose of lobbying the U.S. government. This is voluntary donations because people like Israel, whereas, of course, people don't like Islam. Now, the Arab lobby has worldwide reach. So since the establishment of Israel in 1948, the Arab lobby, in large part, an anti-Israel lobby, has grown to include defense contractors and former government officials employed by 21 Arab states. It has corporations with business interests in the Middle East and NGOs, think of George Soros here, especially human rights organizations or human wrongs organizations. Then, of course, the UN. So the UN is the largest voting bloc and the largest political bloc in the UN, happens to be the 54 countries of the OIC. Remember, every year they have resolutions ad nauseum against Israel, right? These are, of course, blocked by the US ally of Israel, but it's a standing joke that these people are going to make a resolution against Israel because they obviously have, as these 54 countries are the largest voting bloc in the UN, and they have very, very strong control of the UN, along with, of course, China. So they also have a strong influence in academia. So they own academics, particularly from Islam-funded University Middle East studies departments. So once we get into the numbers, once we start digging into the actual finances and start following the money, you're going to see how much money these guys are throwing around. And it's not just lobbying money. This money's going everywhere. Technology, media, you name it. These guys are throwing untold billions at industry. Of course, it has Israel haters in a significant percentage of the media and also cultural elite. Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel groups who are also cloaked as anti-Zionists. These are very stupid Christians. And then, of course, you've got leaders and diplomats from 21 Arab governments and non-Arab Islamic nations as well. And, of course, as I said, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which wields critical influence at the UN and at the EU. Now, the Arab lobby has no popular support. For 90 years, the Arab lobby has worked to influence U.S. policy by directly lobbying and paying decision makers. It spends billions. The Bush family has earned at least $1,470 million, that's $1.47 billion from Saudi Arabia that is known. Then, of course, you have their close ties to the Clinton family. They're very close ties, and they're huge financial donations to the Clinton family. Then you've got this guy, Grover Norquist. He is a well-known Muslim Brotherhood enabler. And of course, we've got John Brennan, who is very much thought to be a Muslim himself. If you look at the movie O Dark 30, which is on the on how they traced and eventually killed Osama bin Laden within the movie, he is portrayed as praying like a Muslim in his office when she goes to visit him. When I think Maya, not a real name, when she goes to visit him in the office, he is praying as a Muslim. So yeah, and he was head of the CIA. So there you go. Now, indirectly, and we're going to talk about Huma Abedin in a minute, they're manipulating the media. They are propagandizing. For instance, they own one of the most influential media companies in the world. You guys may know, what's that Qatari newspaper called? The Qatari television network? Do you remember, Harry?
I don't know. No.
Okay, well, Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera
Yes,
is a
yes,
major, and it's got multiple subsidiaries, and they're incredibly influential and popular. Also, they propagandize the American educational system to the detriment of national interest. We're going to get into that. So for the moment, I'm going to pause here. Let me just see if I've missed anything. And then I'm going to pause it. Okay, they've sunk billions of dollars into U.S. universities for Islamic dawah, the propaganda. Right? Islamic dawah is not evangelization. It is propaganda. It is correctly defined in the dictionary as propaganda. It is not evangelization. And of course, they've placed the agents into the US government, numerous agents, and we'll have a quick look now at Huma Abedin and her attachments to the Muslim World League. So let's have a look at that. So let's have a look at Huma Abedin. So I'll go for like another 20 minutes, I think, because my voice will get tired. But any comments or questions so far?
I will see if there are any questions. Guys, do you want to ask questions or make comments? Quick ones? Please raise your hand if you do.
Okay. So is this giving you a new perspective thus far, Harry? Or giving you something to think about?
I was aware of that to a certain degree, but of course, the evidence you provide is always incredible. I just want to say for the record, Lloyd is not a Jew, not an Israeli. He's from Saudi Arabia. Oh my God, South Africa. And he's a Christian, so you can't blame him for being too Jewish.
Okay, right. So let's look at Huma Mahmoud Abedin and the Muslim Brotherhood. So she has been named Hillary Clinton's shadow. Others have called her Clinton's... Actually, you know what? I'm going to paste this link to this document. I'm going to paste this in the chat so you guys can download this for yourself and have a look at it for yourself. I'm just going to drop this in the chat right now. There you go. I've dropped this in. I'm also going to drop in another document link to money that gets spent by these people on US universities, because we're going to go into that at some point. Okay, let's go on. She's been named Hillary Clinton's shadow. Others have called her Clinton's surrogate daughter. She was the vice chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. She served as PA, personal assistant, to Clinton's first presidential run in 2008. She's been there for a while. She became Hillary's deputy chief of staff when Clinton was appointed as President Barack Obama's Secretary of State in 2009. She handled day-to-day operations for her boss, from faxes and emails to booking hair appointments, and also she had direct access to Hillary's cell phone. She would take calls on the phone. She was considered by many as the most powerful person in Hillary's campaign organization. Reporter Annie Carney wrote on Politico.com that Abedin was the only official channel to Clinton over the past year and has been elevated to the most senior member of Clinton's old guard. In that capacity, Huma is occupying a perch overseeing the campaign operation. So she would have been the right-hand woman of what would have been the next president. Now, the Clinton emails to be released. Let's have a look at this CBS News report. The State Department will release later today the final batch of emails from Hillary Clinton's private server. We're going to go through some Hillary emails in a bit too, but the State Department publicly released thousands of emails from Clinton and her aides after it was discovered that she'd used a private email server during her 4-year tenure as Secretary of State. Following the release, Abedin's role in coordinating Clinton's life became public knowledge. The exchanges between Clinton and Abedin revealed she scheduled Clinton's medical and beauty appointments and had full access to the former Secretary of State. Now, Abedin lived in Saudi for 16 years. She relocated from Michigan, the U.S., to Jeddah, which is 86 kilometers or 53 miles from Mecca, Saudi Arabia, with her parents who were Indian, Muslim, and Pakistani academics. Her late father, Syed means someone who's descended from the line of Muhammad. Syed Zainul Abedin was Indian. In the 70s, he was affiliated with the Muslim Students Association at Western Michigan University, which if you're going to have a look, you'll probably find that it receives a lot of Islamic money. And the MSA is the main organization through which the Muslim Brotherhood established itself in the United States. The Muslim Brotherhood is Islam's largest, they're one of the world's largest, maybe the second largest secret society in the world, but they are also a well-known terror group. They have been responsible. They had a wet work division, which was, well, in theory, shut down, right? They're responsible for at least one presidential assassination in Egypt. And of course, they founded at least 200 known terror groups. So her mother, Saleha Mahmoud Abedin, was born in Pakistan, received a PhD in sociology from the University of Pennsylvania in 1977. So Syed, a Muslim claiming descent from Muhammad, and Abedi means one who serves, one who worships Allah. Abedin of those who are worshippers of Allah, plural. So that is what her name means, one who serves and worships Allah. Abedin's father helped start an international journal called the Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs. And Abedin worked part-time at the journal between 1998 and 2009 at George Washington University. She was a graduate there. And this Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs gets interesting. She married ex-Congressman Anthony Weiner. That's our sad-looking guy here. Poor thing. Questions have been raised about Abedin's arrangement to accept outside income as a consultant while working for the Clinton campaign. While working for Clinton at the State Department. Clinton actually signed off on a controversial deal in 2012 that let Abedin work for the State Department and a private consulting firm called Teneo Holdings with close ties to the Clinton family. She was a special government employee. She did not disclose in a financial report the special employment arrangement and the $135,000 she earned in violation of the law. Public officials are supposed to reveal significant sources of income. Her title did not change. Her title change did not become public knowledge for a long time, right? And of course, people warned of potential conflicts of interest. And because she now had a second interest because she was making a bunch of money from a consultant agency. A number of analysts noted it is extremely rare for Islamic women, particularly those who have families with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, to marry non-Muslims like Weiner. So why did she marry into the politics? And he is also Jewish. Indeed, Dr. Anwar Shub, the highest-ranking faculty authority at the College of Sharia and Islamic Studies in Kuwait, formally declared that Abedin's marriage to Weiner was null and void under the dictates of Sharia law, which forbids matrimony between a Muslim woman and an infidel. He classified the Abedin-Weiner union as a form of adultery. Right. So now let's talk about these guys. How did Pakistan steal the US's top secret info? Another issue that got swept under the rug. Okay. This company, DWS, hired the Pakistani Awan brothers as US Capitol technical staff. DWS got these Awan brothers top secret security clearance access. Okay. Then, of course, they copied all the congressman's data to Huma Abedin's server. Just a coincidence, no doubt. This data was then transferred directly to Pakistan, as far as I know, to the ISI, right? The Pakistani's internal secret intelligence agency. Then, of course, Pakistan donated millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation charity. So let me see. They hired two Pakistani brothers who got given top secret clearance, who then copied data from the government to Huma Abedin's server. This data was then transferred to the Pakistani secret intelligence agency, and then the Pakistanis paid millions to the Clinton Foundation. Does something smell right there to you, Harry?
Yeah, I guess that's the way things should be like.
That's just how it is, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Imran Awan and his family were banned from the House Computer Network in February 2017 after the top law enforcement officer wrote that Imran is an ongoing and serious risk to the House of Reps, threatening the integrity of our information systems, and that a server containing evidence had gone missing. They stole an entire server of data. The Inspector General said the logs showed unauthorized access and procurement records were falsified. Imran Awan was Democrat U.S. Rep Debbie Wasserman Schultz's top information technology aide. So that's the, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Yeah, that is it. Sorry, DWS, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. My bad. Okay. He was her top information technology aide, and he had split his time between several Democratic lawmakers, most of whom had fired him in February. But DWS kept him on until he was arrested in July while trying to board a flight for Pakistan. DWS was, of course, very close to Hillary. Imran Awan was allowed a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to bank fraud, but prosecutors found no evidence that he violated federal law with respect to House computer systems. How convenient. The DNC chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, failed to fire him after he allegedly stole House property, and he wired nearly $300,000 to Pakistan and was arrested at the airport for bank fraud. And then a House Office of Inspector General investigation determined that he and his crew, none of whom had undergone background checks. When I joined the company that I worked for in the Middle East, before I got the job, I had to wait 12 months while they got me clearance. 12 whole months. And then when I got the job, I had to do additional clearance. It's crazy. Okay. These guys were hired for the US government with no background checks to gain the IT positions they held in Congress, and they committed numerous violations of House security policy. So she has a history and alarming connections that are unknown to most Americans. Okay, let's have a look. Hillary spoke at Huma's wedding, saying that if she had a second daughter, it would be Huma. So let's have a look. She returned. She was born in the USA. They lived in Saudi for 16 years. She studied at George Washington, which takes a lot of Islamic money. She'd become an intern for Hillary and started working full-time. And in 1996, she was working for her family business, a journal from the Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs. The Abedin family business is owned by, coincidentally, Saudi Arabia's global organization that promotes Wahhabi Islam, Islamic supremacy, and Sharia law called the Muslim World League. They actually share an office at 46 Goodge Street, London. Let's have a look here. So this is the Muslim World League. If you look on Google, it says here 46 Goodge Street, London. So this is the Saudi Arabian organization for propagandization and dawah of their Wahhabi Islam. And let's have a look. Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs. Oh, just so by the way, 46 Goodge Street, London. They share an office. They're in the same office. She's an agent for Saudi Arabia. And of course, the Institute of Muslim Minority Affairs. And I mean, of course, you can see Goodge Street. And of course, this guy, okay, the partner of her father that started this, is one of the founders of the Muslim World League. And he served as vice president of the Saudi Shura Council, the Royal Consultative Assembly and advisory body to the King of Saudi Arabia. He created the Abedin family business along with their father, and he's known to have funded Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, as did Saudi Arabia, for many years. The organization was declared guilty of founding Al-Qaeda terrorism by the U.S. State Department during the Holy Land Foundation trial. So I'll pause there on that, but understand this woman is up to her neck in it, and of course, it just goes unnoticed. Comment before I go on?
No, just a big thank you. Would you like me to see if there are questions?
Sure. Yep. So
guys, questions? Any questions? JJ, anyone?
Yes, please.
yes.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I'm from what you're presenting, I'm noticing a lot of ties to Saudi Arabia. I mean, is that where most of this funding to get these people in these positions is coming from, or because I mean,
yes.
through my own research, I've noticed. I'm sorry.
Qatar competes with Saudi, but Saudi has been the elephant in the room. Yes.
Okay, because I've noticed through my own research that a lot of these attacks that you brought up earlier, I mean, I don't have a specific number, but a lot of these so-called, Muslim terrorist attacks are CIA funded, instigated. Somehow or another, the CIA has some type of involvement in them, especially, in Iran and Syria and Libya for a while. So, I mean, any thoughts on that?
Look, I think any narrative can be twisted to try to say that Islamic violence is nothing to do with Islam because Muslims are just poor, manipulated, innocent people who were just forced to do these things by the evil, evil Jews who run the evil, evil CIA. And they have no agency of their own, and their doctrine doesn't actually drive them to do exactly that. First of all, that's an attempt, again, to blame Islam on the Catholic Church, to blame Islam on the Jews, to blame Islam on the Swiss, to blame Islam on the Jesuits, to blame, you pick the target they want to blame. Anyone but Islam. They cannot blame Islam. Obviously, that's just propaganda. Now, look, is the CIA dirty? I think we can agree that it is. Is the FBI dirty? I think we can certainly agree that the FBI is dirty too. So yeah, has there been elements that have infiltrated these organizations for their own benefit? Yes, certainly. Does the CIA do things of this nature? Probably yes. Is everything necessarily is every Islamic terror attack necessarily a CIA plot? No. So understand this. I would say that I wouldn't want to accept any conclusion until we've looked at it and taken it apart properly. But Islam has the money. It has the motivation, and its doctrine directly calls for violence. Its doctrine directly calls for any kind of manipulation and deceit to get its way and to beat its enemies at any cost, take over the world, and they will infiltrate anyway. They will try to manipulate anyway. We'll see that. We'll see that they've had connections into the CIA. We'll see they've had connections into the US government for many years at the presidential level. So we're going to see they've got plenty of connections. So before forming any one particular organization and saying, well, the CIA is responsible for Islamic violence. No, Islam is responsible for Islam's violence. Don't let someone else take the blame for what Islam has done.
Well, my point was with obviously you haven't shown that there is obvious, Islamic influence into, the CIA and other U.S. governmental,
Are you saying it doesn't exist, or because I didn't get to those pages yet?
No, I'm saying that I agree with you, but it seems to me like from what you're presenting that that Islam is somehow using these governmental departments as tools to get their bidding done. I mean, I know that's kind of speculative at this point, but I mean,
I think that's fair.
I think it's reasonable speculation.
I agree. So yeah, let me continue. You'll see as we start adding this. I'm trying to. So understand, U.S. policy is pro-Israel because Americans are pro-Israel. It's not because of AIPAC. Notice here, this is over the last from 1988 until 2012. Americans are generally very pro-Israel. They like Israel, but look here at the support for Islam. It's at 12% versus 64%. So understand, people don't like Islam. They don't like the Palestinians. And they've had to spend billions to try to change this number, okay, to try to make the Palestinian thing sexy. But people don't like Islam because it is violent, because they know that it is immoral. right? So there's a common, shall we say, fondness towards Israel on the whole within the West, right? And of course, they've had to spend a lot of money to try to change that from a propaganda level. So American sympathies for Israel match an all-time high. Okay. Now, the structure of the Arab lobby. So you've got the Saudi lobby, then you've got the internal domestic lobby. Okay. So you've got, as I said, like James Zogby. So you've got Arab Americans, you've got Islamic groups, and you've got these idiot Christians on the bottom right corner here. Okay. Then you've got Arabists. You can think of these people as people in industry or people in academia. Then, of course, you've got the oil industry and defense contractors and then former government officials. This is quite a network that they've managed to put together. So now Muslims have no money and no power. I mean, when you have some time, have a look at, go count the number of billionaires in Saudi versus the number of billionaires in Israel and who's got the most money. Check what that list tells you. Forbes keeps a rich list of millionaires and billionaires. Have a read through it one time. Have a look at who owns these massive fleets of jets or whatever, these big luxury aircraft. You know, make a count. See how many of those are owned by the Saudis or by the Muslims. Make a count of how many super yachts. At one time, when I made a count, 7 of the world's 10 major super yachts were owned by Muslims, or by Arabs, okay, by Muslims, and 3, there was like 1 by a Russian, 1 by, I don't know, you know, but 7 of 10, okay. So yeah, there's a lot. They have a lot of money. So in this interview, we'll get into more detail here. So in 2017, the Muslims, they contacted every single senator, as well as all of those who are on the appropriations committees, the purchasing committees, the foreign affairs committees, and the armed services committees multiple times. Those who are directly making decisions about whether or not arms deals, multi-billion-dollar arms deals, are going through with the government. But the other side of it is a massive public relations campaign, and that's very much focused on pushing Saudi Arabia's reform agenda and portraying the Saudis as a valuable ally within the Middle East, while they are attempting to undermine the U.S. Let's have a look. The Arab lobby in America and influence over the United States. Lost in all the controversy over the mosque is the fact that the Arab lobby is one of the strongest in America, even stronger than Israel's, says a controversial new book by Alan Dershowitz. Okay, fine, maybe you don't like Alan Dershowitz, but fine, let's continue. It is time to silence the Saudi lobbying machine in Washington. That's from the Washington Post. Okay, of course, there was a huge outcry after the death of Jamal Khashoggi. Of course, Jamal Khashoggi was also the bad guy. And of course, there was no doubt that he was going to be killed at some point. He was a spy for Qatar. Right? Let's have a look. Let's continue. Of course, this was an opportunity for Qatar to take the axe out to Saudi to try to win political favor. According to a news report from Foreign Influence Transparency Initiative, okay, firms registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act reported receiving more than $40 million from Saudi Arabia in 2017 and 2018. Saudi lobbyists and PR professionals have contacted Congress, the executive branch, media outlets, and think tanks more than 4,000 times in those 2 years. This work has been mostly focused on ensuring the sales of U.S. arms to Saudi and blocking congressional actions that would end U.S. support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. Okay, let's continue. Saudi Arabia has amassed one of the largest and most well-funded influence operations in the United States. It has more than 24 lobbying and public relations firms on its payroll. Its lobbyists have lined congressional campaign coffers on the very same day they met with senators to discuss Saudi interests. And the Saudis were pumping cash into think tanks and elite American universities across the nation. We'll continue that. That gets more and more interesting once you start to see what they're doing with that money. This report says Saudi-hired lobbyists give millions to influence the U.S. Congress. Okay, let's have a look. The Saudi prosecutor said blah, blah, blah. So this is about Jamal Khashoggi, and of course the Saudis have poured money into lobbying for decades, but the numbers, well, something about the numbers. Yeah, numbers don't get reported for some reason. What makes the U.S.-Saudi relationship so special? Weapons, oil, and an army of lobbyists. If they have an army of lobbyists, if they have so much money, remember I said earlier that the royal family of Britain is estimated, and this is not as simple as people seem to make it out to be, but their net worth as a whole is estimated to be about $86 to $88 billion. The King of Saudi Arabia, the royal family of Saudi Arabia, is worth an estimated $1.4 trillion. So you're looking at if you're at 86, they're at 1,400. Okay, that is significant. That's about 16 times more money that they have. Of course, the Queen herself is only worth an estimated $530 million, because most of what is owned by the royal family technically is held in trust. It doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the state. It is not personal property, it is not property that they can sell. Understand? It is owned by the British state. Their duties are ceremonial. They do not actually have political influence and control. So whereas the Saudi king literally owns the country. Let's continue. US lobbyists continue working with Saudi Arabia after the Khashoggi killing, and of course the lucrative relationship is unlikely to die anytime soon because the relationship is too lucrative. Let's look at the royal touch, the Saudi lobby juggernaut. How Saudi money keeps Washington at war in Yemen. They seem to have influence. Diplomatic crisis spotlights Saudi Arabia's spending in Washington. Lobbying firms, think tanks, and investors are all coming under scrutiny over their ties to the kingdom. Khashoggi is shining a spotlight on just how integral the country and its money have become to Washington, with lobbying firms, think tanks, and investors under scrutiny. The Saudis have exerted influence in Washington for decades, from shelling out millions on lobbying firms to sending high-powered members of the royal family to serve as ambassadors and social figures. The kingdom doled out cash to Washington think tanks such as the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Emerson Collective, which has helped fund DC media organizations, and it also has links to Saudi Arabia. Then you've got Saudi Aramco, which is, I think, possibly the world's biggest company, if not the world's biggest oil company at least. The national oil company has hired its own consultants and public relations firms, including for a planned $100 billion initial public offering. So they're not a small company. Saudi Arabian lobbyists have many friends in DC. Okay, so, yep. So let's continue. This is Barack Obama with the Saudi king. And the Saudi government has a vast network of PR lobby firms in the US, and the Saudi government and its affiliates have spent millions of dollars on US law, lobby, and public relations firms to raise the country's visibility in the US and before the United Nations. How much Saudi Arabia spends to influence public opinion in the US? Well, they are spending money to influence public opinion in the US. And Mary Louise Kelly of NPR talks with Lydia Dennett, the investigator with the Project on Government Oversight, and we mentioned her earlier, about how much Saudi Arabia has spent in the US on lobbying and what the money has bought them. That money is buying something. Khashoggi outcry may spur Saudis to step up their already powerful lobbying. Countries tend to spend more when relationships sour in Washington. Saudi lobbying in the US has tripled since Trump took office. Highly relevant. Trump was giving them a very hard time. They had to spend much more money. Saudi lobbying in the US tripled during Trump's first year in office. They spent almost $27 million on US lobbying in 2017, nearly triple the amount during former President Obama's last year in office. So understand, Obama was very friendly to the Saudis, very, very friendly. Saudis used incentives and threats to shut down UN investigation in Yemen. So yes, they're not beyond using bribes, which are incentives, and threats, direct threats. Saudi lobbying jeopardizes UN's Yemen war crimes probe. Activists say, I bet nothing came from that probe. High-level Saudi visit follows multi-million-dollar foreign influence operation. Well, these are not just lobbyists, these are influence operations. Influence operations are usually run by their intelligence agencies. Biden shows up. Top Biden administrations hosted Saudi Arabia's Prince Khalid bin Salman, brother to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Saudi Arabia's current Deputy Defense Minister. He was the kingdom's ambassador to the US when Jamal Khashoggi was murdered on the orders of the Crown Prince in 2018. The Biden administration did not publicly disclose the visit, and it follows millions of dollars the Saudi government has spent on influence and lobbying in the US. So yeah, Joe Biden faced criticism of his decision not to sanction the Saudis. Well, why would he not sanction the Saudis after all that money was paid to them? Okay. And of course, in the industry giant and of course defense industry giant Raytheon tweeted they enjoyed seeing the Crown Prince's brother. The military industrial complex was happy to see them, of course. How Saudi Arabia restored its US influence machine after the Khashoggi murder by spending a ton of money. So okay, let's see. The Saudi lobby moves from K Street to Main Street. I know I'm drowning you in these things, but understand there is no shortage of evidence. There's no shortage of reporting on just how much lobbying the Saudis. We haven't even got into the Qataris, okay, but just the Saudis alone. So they've enlisted community members across the US to peddle the best version of the kingdom. The Saudi lobby has given its brand an American as apple pie shine, which is entirely just a propaganda campaign and a very successful one in some areas. So Next, so I'll start to wind down for the time being. We'll continue this next week, but the House of Bush and the House of Saud, we're going to go into a little bit of discussion on the Bush family. They have very strong links to Saudi Arabia, and of course, these people have had direct influence to the president, the president's family, the head of the CIA's family for decades. Let's have a look. 2 days after 9/11, US air traffic was tightly restricted. 140 Saudis, royals, and family of Osama bin Laden were permitted to leave and escape questioning by US intelligence. 2 days after 9/11, the Saudis, including Osama bin Laden's family, were allowed to flee the US and escape questioning by US intelligence. All the answers, everything needed to dismantle Osama bin Laden's organization can be found in Saudi Arabia. This is a statement from John O'Neill, who was an FBI counter-terror expert who died in the World Trade Center. Read up on this man, what he had to say. Very interesting. In 1970s, the oil-rich House of Saud began courting American politicians in a bid for military protection, influence, and investment opportunity. With the Bush family, the Saudis hit a gusher. Now understand, when they talk about cooperation, it's not just about investment, it's also they're buying something, they're buying influence, they are getting their way into the government, they're attempting to promote their agenda, and they've been very successful. So far, I'll stop here for the moment. So your thoughts, Harry?
This is very important information, and I always appreciate the length and the details you go into. That's very good. I'm personally mostly interested in how they influence the academy. If you can speak to that, or if you prepare that for next time.
So look, that is something that I will get to. So let me show. Okay, this is slide number 23. I know we've gone through a lot of slides, but so I've got further information. We're going to talk about the Bush family connections, right? So there's extensive links to the Bush family. Okay, these guys are very close, very detailed, very deep personal ties with the Bush family. So these guys are, really close to the Bushes. And then then you can see here on the left-hand side, this is when you start looking at spending. Then I've got to go into spending. Okay, the academy stuff is at the end. I'll give you a rough overview. What I'll do is I'll do a rough overview here now to let you know what we would come up to with, what we would get to in the next discussion. So I'll bring up this slide. Let's have a look, since you did ask about it, just as a preview. This is a list of the college foreign gift reporting spreadsheet. Okay, this is a list of countries that have donated money or sent money to US colleges. Now, the money is only reported if the total rises above $250,000. Okay, if it's below that, it is not reported. We also know from the FBI that, for instance, China has been spending untold billions. The amount that we have here for China, which up to 2019, I believe it was, late 2018 here, was only $680 million. We know that the real number is at least double, if not triple or quadruple, but the reporting has not been correct because there are ways and means around the reporting. And also, if the money was sent from China, great, you track it. If the money was sent to your cousin Sal, who then sent it to his aunt, Jill, who then sent it to her cousin Jimmy, who then gave it to the university, well, that's good old American money. No need to report it now. Now, why would we? Because it came from a good old American donor who's got nothing but apple pie in his heart. Okay, so let's have a quick look. Israel donated up to this period. Now, this, I think the dates run, from 2011 to 2018 on this particular report. Okay, the dates that you can go back into this college foreign gift reporting website. I've given you the link is in the chat. You guys can grab it. You can also see it here on the screen. You can actually grab and go look at the report and go through the data yourself. Now, I last did this presentation about 2 years ago. I did it a couple of days ago, certainly, but I haven't updated every slide. I've updated some slides. I've updated some numbers. So the numbers are going to be more or less accurate, but not 100% anymore, because I've made some updates, but not complete updates. And not all of it is the latest data, okay? But it was accurate at the time. Okay, so Israel donated up to about 2018, $53 million in 275 donations to universities. Okay, that is here. Now, understand that Israel donates in generally two capacities. One, to promote farming, and two, to promote medicine research. We call it biotech, right? So medication and medical research and farming, right? Now, let's have a look here. If you just look at Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan itself donates more money in its propaganda campaigns into the academy than does Israel. Kazakhstan, of all places, donates more money than Israel. Kuwait donates more money than Israel. Together, okay, so let's have a look here. Then Qatar, 53 million for Israel, $1,253,000 for Qatar. Okay, that's in 441 donations. Now, if you look at this combined total of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, this is 35.4 times more than Israel spent. Between Qatar and Saudi Arabia alone, that is 36 times more money than Israel has spent on university dawah, right? Once you add Kazakhstan and Kuwait, you're looking at a total of $2 billion plus, which is 38 times more money than Israel has spent, right? This is with the old numbers, right? Once you add the UAE with its $230 million, your top five total of these Islamic countries, these are just the top five Islamic countries alone have spent 42 times more money than Israel. So the top five Islamic countries have donated 42 times more money over the last decade into universities than Israel has. When you total them all up, okay, there are 1,848 Islamic donations, which total to 70 times more than Israel's biotech spend. 69.7 times more money comes from that. This includes China, okay? So once you add China, you're looking at $3.8 billion, which is 70 times more money spent influencing the top 13 universities in America than Israel does. Does that clarify at least?
Yes, but do you have any? I mean, can you demonstrate to us to which departments the money goes into?
The money typically goes to, look, they don't just only send it to universities. There's think tanks, but they send it to Middle Eastern studies departments, just like the Chinese donate to these Confucius institutes, or they donate to political studies institutes, understand? So anything that's political, anything that studies counterterrorism, they fund, because they want to teach you that Islam is a religion of peace and those counterterrorism people are all nasty. And of course, in the theology, they infiltrate the theology departments, they infiltrate political, anything that deals with politics, anything that deals with sociology, all of those things. That's where they send their money. They are brainwashing people. They are buying lecturers. We'll talk about that more. I mean, I'm skipping ahead, understand? Just because you asked me to, but does this help you? I mean, these guys are not, look, you're not spending $4 billion and being stupid about it. They've got a plan here. I hope that's clear.
Yes, it is. David has a question, and when you're done with the presentation, I personally would be very happy if you can speak for a few minutes about this "We Are All Gods" that we started before the event.
Okay, so follow the money, University Dawah. For instance, George Washington University, and these guys are important. Okay, the U.S. taxpayer, okay, Medi Studies funding. Okay, so the U.S. taxpayer has donated all of, okay, this is 2019 to 2021. Okay. This is from Title VI grants, source Department of Education, Title VI grants, 2019 to 2021, Department of Education, foreign gifts and contracts data. Okay. So yeah, Title VI grants and 2011 to June 2018, as I mentioned earlier, contracts data. Okay. The U.S. taxpayer, out of the goodness of his heart, has donated $258,000, for instance, to George Washington University, out of the goodness of his heart. Okay. Muslim nations have donated $101 million. Why? Israel donated $507,000. These guys have donated 200 times more money than Israel. 200 times to one university. Do you understand? There's questions to be asked here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so I mean, look, so we'll cover the rest of this next week. If you look at this graph, for instance, here's Israel, this is Qatar.
Yeah.
Understand? You start adding this up, and this moves off the edge of the screen here. This chart, it dwarfs anything that Israel spends. Do you understand? There's just so much money on university lobbying. What are they getting for their money? We need to ask, what are they getting? What are they spending this on? What are they getting for this amount of money? And if you want to read this article here, Moral, I don't agree with every conclusion here, certainly, but this is a frightening article. It's well worth reading. Moral Hazard: The Life of a Liberal Muslim. It's dated November 18, 2002, and it's in the New Republic magazine. It's online. It's well worth reading to see the kind of political control the kind of threats, intimidation, and bribery they will stoop to manipulate the academia.
Can you
I'll
send
pause
the
here
link
on that.
of this
Just
article?
Google, look it up. Moral Hazard, the New Republic. Just have a look. New Republic, Moral Hazard.
Okay.
The author is Franklin Foer, Foer.
Quickly, maybe you can help find it. Yeah, okay. So let's allow
Copy link. I'll drop the link in the chat.
Okay.
I'm dropping the link in the chat now. There it is.
Yeah. So Lloyd,
Yes,
thank you very much. As usual, the presentation was incredible, very clear.
So what have you taken away so far before I got into all the Bush stuff, or what have you guys taken away from this?
I can't find the members. I only see the invites. 1 second, please.
Okay, David Buckle has something to say, but...
Yeah, but I would like to end the recording first, and then he will ask his question, and then I want you to speak to him just a little bit about that topic. And remain calm, please, because I think we should learn from the other question about the we are all gods. This is something that I wanted you to speak about. So don't lose your patience.
Thanks for putting me on the hot spot just like that. All right.
So thank you very much for this amazing presentation, and we will continue next Monday. Thank you as usual. So I will just end the recording on my end.
I'll do so too now.